And welcome to the Oddity Archive, the show that can take it just as well as it can dish it out, so long as it's by its own hand. I've made fun of a ton of music on this show over the years, and I've also hinted several times that I pursued the rock and roll dream for longer than I care to admit. So today, let's start chipping away at what really is the ultimate oddity, my music career. Might as well discuss it while the whole band is still alive and willing to discuss it. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you the ultimate tale of teenage hubris. Regardless of whether or not I would admit it at the time, I was something of a music connoisseur from an early age. Having said that, the only time I gave a damn in music class in school was when I was allowed to have temporary custody of the coveted rhythm sticks. And no, I never hit anyone with them. Anyway, fast forward to 1995, and I nagged my parents into buying me a guitar. I got a cheap, quasi-classical, nylon-stringed guitar, kinda like the one Willie Nelson plays, which, if memory serves, set my folks back $60. My parents also got me a Hal Leonard beginner's book, which came with a CD. I could never comprehend anything in the book or on the CD. Unsurprisingly, I no longer have either of them. Nonetheless, I haplessly banged away on that guitar for about 2 years, never learning any chords or even how to tune the damn thing. In 1997, perhaps against my folks' better judgment, I succeeded in nagging them into getting me an electric guitar, specifically a black Fender Squier Stratocaster, which I proceeded to haplessly bang away at, albeit usually minus the amp, for many years to come. By 2000, I'd accrued a precious few piano lessons at school, and I was usually blowing my allowance and lawn mowing money on whatever I could pull out of the used vinyl bin at a nearby record store, which was usually 60s, 70s, and 80s rock and pop. Now, I'd already been taking tentative stabs at my own, if you will, compositions as far back as 1998, but by this point, my mission became clear, and that was to be a one-man rock and roll force of nature. But knowing I would need more than just my guitars to accomplish this task, for Christmas of that year, I wanted a keyboard and an electric drum kit, and yes, I got both. Specifically, a Yamaha PSR GX76 keyboard and a Yamaha DD50 digital drum kit. This 15-year-old, yeah, I just gave away my age, was ready to conquer the world.
Feel like a good cry? Then check out Silent Sunday Nights, John Gilbert, Gloria Swanson, and other great stars of the silent screen. Silent Sunday Nights, next on Turner Classic Movies.
Sometime around 1996 or 7, I developed a strange fondness for silent film. Seriously, going into the early 2000s, I managed to fill up a ton of VHS tapes with Turner Classic Movies' Silent Sunday Nights and AMC's periodic 4 a.m. showings of Silence. So it should come as no surprise that my first album was going to be a conceptual piece using the silence as a launching point. The title, Silence is Golden. But of course, addle-brained teenager that I was, I didn't really follow through. At the beginning of 2001, I started working on my debut using my new instruments and nothing more than my dad's old handheld cassette recorder and that little sound recorder program that Windows used to have so I could overdub. Let me explain the process. Generally, if the track involved more than one instrument, I'd record the first part to the tape recorder, record the next part with the existing stuff playing back on tape into the Windows recorder, then repeat the cycle until the song was finished. Since I couldn't hear most of the playback, the levels are largely random. Oh yeah, and the Windows recorder wouldn't record for more than 1 minute at a time. Between the primitive recording setup and my sheer ineptitude, you can imagine how well this went. Let's discuss the, I guess, songs. Cheeky little monkey that I am, I figured the best way to start my Silence is Golden album was with an extended period of silence. To get things going in terms of actual sound, I came up with the brilliant idea of not so subtly walking into the room, setting down my tape recorder, hitting the play button, which started a recording of myself strumming an E minor 11 minus 9 chord. Read the chord that the open strings on a guitar makes in standard tuning. This segues, rather violently, because, album rock, into an attempted classical piano theme to the 1926 Lillian Gish version of The Scarlet Letter. Because I spent too much time listening to Pink Floyd and Emerson, Lake and Palmer back then, I added the arbitrary Scene 73 to the title, because I thought it sounded cool. I'd be willing to bet there aren't even 73 scenes in the whole movie. Anyway, this piece is simply 5 minutes of me attempting to sound graceful and dramatic at the same time. I failed miserably on both counts. Because I knew that all good rocker dudes needed to have at least some lyrics and, worse yet, vocals in their material, this meant having to, rather grudgingly, take the mic. I couldn't sing, I knew it, but I had no choice. So I deliberately buried my vocal under an avalanche of intentionally too loud guitars. I think this song was some sort of especially off-kilter attempt at country rock. Oh yeah, and this track has nothing to do with the Silence is Golden concept. Get used to hearing that phrase, by the way. Back in 1998, I had run outside with my dad's cassette recorder one day to capture the sounds of beautiful downtown Aurora's tornado/civil defense sirens. With these sounds in tow, I tried to build a song stemming from the sirens. What I got was a 13-minute noise excursion, with about 3 minutes of probably public domain incidental music from one of my silent movies built in for no reason whatsoever. This piece was titled The Battle of Elderbush Gulch, after the 1913 D.W. Griffith short. This recording has since been lost. Anyway, not wanting to let something relevant to my semi-precious concept go, I dredged up this piece, rewrote the music, and took another stab at it. Now the piece goes as follows. 2.5 minutes of the civil defense sirens, 2.25 minutes of assorted aborted instrumental concepts, one of which is accompanied by the same incidental music from '98, capped off by a precious few seconds of more of that incidental music. As best as I can tell, there is no battle, implied or otherwise, on this track. This would be the second vocal track on the album, and the second to bear no relation to the silence's golden concept. This time out, I wanted to do a stark, doomy folk song, with a lot of gratuitous guitar solos. Thing was, I really wanted the sound of a steel string acoustic guitar on this one. Of course, I didn't own one yet, so the best alternative was to use my electric guitar unplugged. Because I knew my vocals, given the arrangement, would be more prominent on this one, I opted to merely speak the words. I also capped off the recording with about a minute of ambient audio I'd recorded outdoors, presumably to give the all clear after the sirens that populated the Elderbush track. This cut also stands out in that it's the only one on the album that doesn't segue to or from another track.
Open up my front door. Look down at the floor. I see the paper boy has brought more. News about use and abuse. Alright.
Named after Rudolph Valentino's Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, this was to be my mega ambitious progressive instrumental. Of course, what I got was an 8-minute cacophony. For whatever reason, I thought it would be cool to end this one with a little intentionally nightmare-inducing noise collage.
For the past 5 years, we've held this contest to give aspiring composers the chance to score one of the many silent films in our TCM library, movies that we otherwise wouldn't be able to show because they have no music tracks.
Throughout the 2000s, Turner Classic Movies hosted a Young Film Composers competition. Every year, they'd dust off at least one silent film from the MGM vault, cull a few clips from them, post them for download. You'd record and or write a paper score for one of those clips, and you'd submit it. The winner got at least $10,000 in prize money, and better yet, the job of scoring one of those languishing MGM silents. The film du jour of 2001 was the 1928 Greta Garbo vehicle A Woman of Affairs, which had already been on video, but still. I was too young to enter the competition, you had to be at least 18, but nonetheless, I set about writing 2 pieces for the film. One of these was a theme for the movie. I really tried my darndest to write a good dramatic theme, but it was awful. In an early moment of self-awareness, I figured this POS would sound better backwards, so I simply reversed the recording I'd made, and lo and behold, it blew the real piece away. This is actually one song that I spread out over 2 tracks, because segues are cool, no matter how pointless. This was my first attempt at a straight pop rock tune. It's also an especially dumb and, of course, noisy Jackson Browne knockoff. Once again, this bears no relation to the Silence is Golden concept. The final vocal cut on the album was my second attempt at some sort of pseudo-progressive epic. Of course, Circle Sky was a Monkees tune, and I loved the Head film from which it came, but aside from that, there's no Monkees connection. Again, I just thought it sounded cool. This one is memorable for my attempts at making the vocal a little more prominent, albeit hiding under an ocean of homebrew reverb, as well as the recurring, nagging guitar line. More Jackson Browne knockoff lyrics here, plus no relation to the Silence is Golden concept.
There is a well below the circle sky, out beyond the plains where the waters have dry. They gather around it and do their dance. They throw a pebble down the well to touch the fiery surface of its hell.
This was my attempt at scoring the TCM provided scene to A Woman of Affairs. This was another serious stab at composition, at the quote-unquote piano, of course, and this was also the moment that I realized I couldn't make my two hands do two separate things at the same time. My solution? A one-handed score to the scene. The scene in question ends, and as such my album, with one of the characters jumping out a window to his death. In retrospect, this seems rather appropriate given the rather reckless nature of this album. Partway through the making of Silence is Golden, I experienced something of an epiphany. Unfortunately, it didn't involve trying to learn an instrument or trying to improve as a singer or trying to write better songs. Hell no. I figured what was really holding me back was my lack of multi-track recording equipment. So, partway through the making of Silence is Golden, I started saving up for a 4-track cassette recorder. And shortly after finishing the album, I acquired said multi-tracker, and I set about making album number 2, which charitably could be considered just an extended experiment with the new gear. But anyway, album number 2, and boy is it a number 2 of an album, is called Around the Sun. And if you thought the first album sucked, you ain't heard nothing yet. I hate this album. I really hate this album. Anyway, in April of 2001, I had saved enough money for the cheapest 4-track cassette multi-tracker available at the local Mars Music, a now-defunct chain. I got a hot pink Fostex X14. Why hot pink, you might ask? It was $10 less than the other colors. This unit featured a built-in microphone and 4 tremendously awkward faders and could record only 1 track at a time. And that was about it. Of course, this was light years ahead of my then current setup. And naturally, the first thing I did when I acquired this unit was improvise a Pink Floyd sort of thing. But then it was down to business. The first thing I did was write and record another simplistic, quasi-classical piece with a tie to silent film. This one was called Sparrows, and was intended as a theme to the 1926 Mary Pickford film of the same name. Honestly, this is as good as this album gets. I'd recently gotten somewhat into jazz fusion, jazz rock kind of stuff. I hadn't been able to attempt anything like that under the previous recording setup, so naturally, the next order of business was to take a stab at that idea. This was called Days of Wine and Roses, of course, after the Jack Lemmon movie, which I hadn't actually seen yet. But then things went completely off the rails. I suddenly remembered that I had set out to be a one-man rock and roll wrecking crew and that I had a world to conquer, damn it. Oh yeah, and I was now socially and politically enlightened to boot. So I proceeded to, very quickly, write a bunch of lyrics, no music, detailing all the injustice and isolation in the world, the latter being my personal favorite. Among the lyrical gems from this album are
Nobody knows my name, but everybody knows my scene. Nobody knows me or all the shit that I've seen. In a place I left my mark forever to be seen. I have no intention to fulfill your twisted dream. I don't care what you say, I won't do that because I don't care. Jean Hollow is gone, the king has been forgotten. Somebody needs to come in and let us be Charleston. Walk slow and run, check the shiny handle on your gun. It's too late now, I think the end has begun.
and my personal favorite,
I sold my soul to the man in my hole. I am the loner, I work alone.
Also in my quest to prove my rock and roll mettle, I undertook the task of creating, in my mind, the most rocking sequence of all time. I took two sets of the lyrics I had come up with and used them as a launching point for a pair of extended noise jams that'd make the Velvet Underground run for cover. In the process, creating a grand total 16-minute plus marathon of pure rock debauchery. Getting back to the technical end of things, by this point I now had access to a standalone CD burner, which is currently in my possession, which I had no idea how to use at the time. For whatever reason, every component to a stereo system was stuck into the input of this thing via a dangerously long series of piggyback cables. Naturally, anything I ever plugged into it was at the end of that long line, causing a wash of lossy, feedbacky noise over everything I did. This is what my original CD of this album sounded like. Years later, after I'd acquired my current CD burner, we're talking 2009, I decided to go back and take a new pass at the tapes so I could make myself a non-tin can version of the album. It took me forever to find the tapes because, well, I never bothered to label them at the time. Once I found the 2 cassettes worth of Around the Sun material, I realized that I was missing one of the tracks from the album, namely a tune called 5 More Days, which you just heard a bit of. So I found the multi-tracks, also then unlabeled, dug out my more recent Tascam Porta Studio, because I'd long since sold the Fostex, and I went to work. It was here that I remembered that I learned the hard way that there is effectively no B-side to the tape when dealing with a 4-tracker. In other words, the last 45 seconds to the song were lost. These 45 seconds thankfully weren't music. They were of some ambient outdoor noises, a la Save Time Fades Away from Silence is Golden, which functioned as a link to Sparrows. I proceeded to grudgingly re-record these last 45 seconds. As of early 2018, I have yet to locate the original mixdown cassette with 5 More Days, assuming it ever existed at all. Really, a perfect microcosm of everything wrong with this album, if there ever was. Alright, I've got a bit of an extended epilogue for you here, so bear with me. Back in 1971, Harry Nilsson put out an album called Aerial Pandemonium Ballet. And on this album, he took what he felt were the best moments from his first 2 proper albums, which were called Pandemonium Shadow Show and Aerial Ballet, and the title becomes apparent. And he remixed and in some cases partially re-recorded those tracks. Now, sometime in the latter half of 2001, I stumbled onto my copy of that album. And of course, this seemed like an absolutely brilliant concept to me. So in February of 2002, I decided to make my own little aerial pandemonium ballet and take the best or least worst moments from my first 2 albums and take another crack at them. Sort of. I remixed a few cuts from Around the Sun, and they turned out no better than the original mixes. And I re-recorded another one from Around the Sun completely, and that was a live rendition of Graceless Age, which goes on for nearly 16 minutes. And as for the Silence is Golden cuts, there wasn't really anything I could do with those, so I simply reused those. But anyway, the final product was called Around the Silent and Golden Sun, and this actually did get released around March of 2002 on the old mp3.com site, download only, and it sold exactly 0 copies. But nonetheless, fast forward to December, and something called the All Suck Review, that bodes well, got their hands on the redo of Graceless Age, and they reviewed it. So to close things out today, I'm going to leave you with a nice extended clip from that cut, and I'll let you read the text of that review. And this is not one of my little jokes. This is 100% real. I just didn't know how to take a screenshot back then. So anyway, that's it for today's archive. Join me next time when I don't resume the saga of my so-called music career, largely because I'm pretty sure my ratings are going to take a pretty good nosedive over this one. See you next time.